Hello everybody. I'd like to speak today about the lessons that we can learn from Tisha B'Av for the whole year. Tisha B'Av is the day of national mourning for the Jewish people, the day of mourning for the destruction of our temple, the first temple and the second temple. Many, many tragedies befell the Jewish people during this time over history. We have to take the lessons that are to be learned from Tisha B'Av and to apply them to the rest of the year, for the whole year, to ensure that we're not going to have any more Tisha B'Avs, to ensure that the lesson of Tisha B'Av is going to be learned by us, and Bezrat Hashem we can fix the things that need to be fixed up with us and meet the Mashiach Bezrat Hashem quickly in our days. So I want to look at the Gomorian Massacre Didnt, which discusses and explains the reason for the destruction of Jerusalem, the reason for the destruction of our temple, and see what we can learn from there. The Gomorian Massacre Didnt in Perek HaNezokin explains that one of the reasons for the destruction of Jerusalem, for the destruction of our Beit HaMikdash, was because of a particular case that happened with Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. There was a guy, says the Gemara, we're not told his name. Interesting that doesn't seem to be relevant to the whole story. We're told about this guy who was having a big party, and he had a very good friend whose name was Kamtza, and he had an enemy whose name was Bar Kamtza. He sent his secretary to invite Kamtza, his very good friend, to the meal, to the party, but by mistake the secretary went and invited Bar Kamtza, his enemy. Bar Kamtza arrived at the meal. He's sitting there in the big hall eating his fish and the first course, and it comes over to him this person whose name again we don't know, and he says to him, "What are you doing here? Who invited you?" He said, "You invited me, I got an invitation." He said, "No, you didn't. It's a mistake. I wouldn't have invited you. I hate you. I wouldn't have invited you to my party. Please get out." Says Bar Kamtza, "Listen, don't embarrass me here in front of everybody by throwing me out. I'm going to pay you for everything that I'm going to eat. Leave me, let me finish my meal and go peacefully." Said this guy, "No, you're not going to finish your fish. Out, straight away." Says Bar Kamtza, "Please, I'll pay you for half of the whole meal, but just don't throw me out. Don't embarrass me here in front of everybody." Says the guy, "No, out straight away." Says Bar Kamtza, another plea, "I'll pay for the whole meal. I'll pay the thousands of shekels that you're paying to have this whole meet, this whole party, including the band and the photographer and the video. I'll pay for everything. Please, don't embarrass me here in front of everyone by throwing me out." Says this guy, "No." Grabbed him by the collar and marched him very unceremoniously out of the party and threw him out. Bar Kamtza, says the Gemara, said to himself, while he's lying outside totally embarrassed, there were a lot of very important people at that meal, and they didn't say anything. They just sat there while this terrible injustice was being done to me in front of everybody to embarrass me publicly. Embarrassing someone is sometimes worse than killing them. It's compared by our sages to killing them. Making the blood run to their face is like spilling their blood. When a person gets embarrassed and turns red. They all just sat there, said Bar Kamtza. They didn't do anything. They didn't complain. They didn't say, how can you do this? They didn't say, please don't do it. Stop. Let's do this peacefully and nicely. They didn't say anything. Must be that they don't care. They don't care about me, said Bar Kamsa. I am going to go and I'm going to be Moser. I'm going to give over the Jewish people to Caesar. He went to the Caesar and he said to him, the Jews are revolting against you. Said the Caesar, I didn't hear about any revolt. What are you talking about? He said, I'll prove it to you. You send a sacrifice to their Beit HaMikdash, to their temple, and let's see if they're going to bring it or not. Said the Caesar, okay, let's do it. Prepared an animal, sent Bar Kamsa with the animal to the Beit HaMikdash to give it over to see if they're going to bring it as a sacrifice. You're allowed to bring sacrifices from non-Jews in the Beit HaMikdash. Bar Kamsa was very sly though. On his way to the Beit HaMikdash, he made a blemish in the sacrifice in a way that to the Jews is a blemish and to the non-Jews is not considered as a blemish. So the non-Jews wouldn't think that there was any reason for refusing the sacrifice. And he brought it to the rabbis, and the rabbis said, we can't offer up this sacrifice because it's got a blemish in it. Some people said, hang on, but this is the Caesar's sacrifice. You can't send it back. He'll be very, very insulted. It'll be dangerous for us. But said the rabbis, how can we do it? People will start thinking you're allowed to bring sacrifices that have blemishes on them. We can't allow it. They didn't allow it, and Caesar says, Wallah, you see, they are revolting. After the siege started against Jerusalem, there are a lot of other details in this story. An important detail is we see that when the siege started, many of the rabbis in Jerusalem wanted to go out and make peace with the Romans. But some young revolutionary type people wouldn't allow them to do that. So when we analyze this story and try and understand what was the cause of the destruction of our temple, you could say that it was these young guys that didn't allow the rabbis to go out and make peace. You can say it was connected to this guy whose name we don't know, who didn't invite Bar Kamsa to the meal and threw him out. You can say it was Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa was the one. He had a hard time, but that doesn't give him the right to go and give over the Jewish people to Caesar. But in my opinion, the Gemara is telling us the main reason here. The main reason is because the people that were at that meal didn't do anything. They sat back and they let this terrible injustice happen before their eyes, and not did they just not get involved. They didn't go out afterwards to comfort Bar Kamsa, to say, even if they didn't have the strength to stand up to this guy and to say, stop that, you can't do that here, I won't allow you to embarrass another Jew in that way. Even if they couldn't have done that, which is understandable, there are a lot of people like that they can't stand up and object to an injustice, but they could have gone out after Bar Kamsa and calmed him down and sympathized with him. But it seems that no one did. And that's what caused Bar Kamsa to go and do what he did. Not that it's a justification for what Bar Kamsa did, of course, but it seems to be that was the catalyst. That was the reason. That's the thing behind this whole story. And if so, then that's the point that our rabbis want us to learn from the story of Bar Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. That when you see injustice, there's a lot of injustice in the world. It's not necessarily the right thing to do to sit back and say, okay, it's not happening to me, so it's okay. When you see another person suffering, another person being embarrassed, another person suffering injustice, it has to hurt us. It doesn't mean that you always have to go out and fight, because not all of us are up to that. And very often it's not the right thing to do. Yeah, don't get me wrong that you have to go out, we're all going to go out and start fighting with everyone now. Generally, it's the wrong thing to do. That's not the way you're going to stop people from doing injustices. But you have to care, have a heart. We have to, I'm talking to myself, of course, we have to have a heart for our fellows, to help them, to have mercy on them, to feel their suffering, to feel the suffering of others. Let's look at some other cases in Jewish history where we see this same thing. Let's look at Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of the Jewish people, the greatest, most famous Jew that ever lived, brought the Jewish people out of Egypt. How was he appointed as leader of the Jewish people? Let's look in our scriptures, let's look in the Torah. What does the Torah tell us about Moshe Rabbeinu? Why was he worthy to be appointed as the leader of the Jewish people, the person that's going to go up on Mount Sinai and meet with God and be given the whole Torah? What had he done to be worthy of this? What does the Torah tell us? The Torah tells us very, very little about Moshe. It tells us how when he was born, he was thrown into the Nile in this little ark, and he was saved from there by the daughter of Paro. But in the moment, we haven't learned anything about who Moshe was. He was brought into the house of Paro, and he was brought up there, and there's a famous medrash that says about how he once grabbed Paro's crown, and Paro was worried that maybe he wants to become the leader, and therefore he did this test with him, gave him burning coals and a crown to see which one he'd taken. He grabbed the burning he was going to go and grab the crown, and then his hand moved to the burning coals, put them in his mouth, and he became a stutterer. But that's also not an attribute of Moshe Rabbeinu for which, because of that, we can say that Hashem saw that this person is fit to be the leader of the Jewish people. But we do see one story about Moshe Rabbeinu. We see he was living in Paros Palace. He had everything he needed. When you live in Paros Palace, you have everything. You're not lacking anything. I had a friend who was once invited to the White House to meet Bush. A very wealthy person, pays a lot of taxes, so they thought that let's meet him and shake his hand. He went there, arrived, he was told to arrive there like an hour before the meeting. He was put into a room, and as he said, you can have anything you want. Choose. You can have champagne, you can have caviar, you can have a hamburger. Whatever you like, we're going to bring you right now. You're in the house of the king. You're in the White House. You can have anything you like here. Everything is here. All the delicacies of the world are here. It must have been the same in Paros Palace. Moshe had everything. He wasn't lacking anything. But nevertheless, the Torah tells us he went out to see the suffering of his people. He knew the Jews were enslaved. He knew they were suffering. He went out to look and see what's going on there. He cared about his people. When he went out there, he saw an Egyptian soldier beating one of the slaves, one of the Jewish slaves. He couldn't stand the injustice of it. And he went over and he attacked the Egyptian soldier for doing that. Because of that event, because he killed that Egyptian soldier, he had to run away into exile. He had to leave the beautiful home he had. Because he'd seen an injustice and he had to act. He couldn't just keep quiet. If he'd asked the politicians what to do at that time, what would they have answered him? Keep quiet. What are you making a fuss about? No, there's so much injustice in the world. You go home to Paros Palace and carry on eating your hamburgers and drinking your Coca-Cola and drinking champagne and caviar. Just carry on enjoying yourself. You don't need this trouble. But Moshe said, no. I'm going to do what's right here, not what the politicians tell me to do. I have to act here. And he acted. And I would suggest that because of that action, he proved himself to be fit to become the leader of the Jewish people. Because he wouldn't just sit back. He wouldn't allow injustice to happen in front of him. Injustice is something that has to be wiped out. Suffering of my fellow Jews is something that I can't stand to see. It has to be acted on. Even if it's just sympathizing with the other person. Let's go on. Where else in Jewish history do we find an act like this? Let's look at Pincus. Pincus ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen was not a Cohen. He was a simple guy. Aaron was a Cohen, his children were Kohanim. Pincus was already born when Aaron and his children after him were made Kohanim, and so he didn't become a Cohen. But, so he was a simple guy living in his tent. I'm sure he was a great tzaddik. He was getting his man was falling right outside his tent every day. He had what to eat. He was sitting there learning Torah all day. Everything was fine by him. But then there was this plague outside. There were Jews outside that were doing immoral and terrible acts. Not just any Jews, the important Jews, the Chosheva people, the big, wealthy leaders of the community were doing terrible things, terribly immoral acts. And Pincus, this little guy, felt that he had to interfere. Because he interfered, he became a Cohen. Him and all his generations afterwards won this tremendous gift of kahuna, to be Kohanim because of the act of Pincus. Because Pincus was prepared to stand up when he saw injustice, when he saw something wrong happening. He wouldn't just sit back like the community leaders at the meal when Bar Kamsa was thrown out. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu went out to see the suffering of his fellow Jews, so too Pincus couldn't stand the injustice. And we see that he too was appointed as a Cohen because of that. I heard a story from an old person who was a yeshiva bocher, was learning in yeshiva in Poland many years ago, during the time before the war, during the time of the Chafetz Chaim, the great Chafetz Chaim. And he was traveling home from yeshiva, and on the way home he was passing through Radin, so he wanted to stop in Radin, the home of the Chafetz Chaim, for Shabbat, to see the yeshiva, the famous yeshiva there. And after Shabbat, the Chafetz Chaim used to daven in a minyan by his house, to go and daven in his minyan and get a bracha from the Chafetz Chaim. What could be a better idea for a yeshiva bocher than to do something like that when he's on his way home? He went into the Chafetz Chaim on Motzei Shabbat, went up to him to get a bracha. The Chafetz Chaim says to him, "What's your name? Where are you from?" He told him, "I'm a yeshiva bocher." Said the Chafetz Chaim, "You know, I'm a Cohen." "Ah, yeah, I'm a Cohen." "Yeah, you are? Ah, yeah." He said, "Yeah, when we build the Beit HaMikdash, I'm going to be able to go in there, and I'm going to go into places where people that aren't Kohanim won't be able to go. And I'll be able to do their things that people that aren't Kohanim aren't able to do. Because I'm a Cohen." "Are you a Cohen?" The guy says, "No, I'm not a Cohen." Says the Chafetz Chaim, "Why aren't you a Cohen?" "Why am I not a Cohen? Because my father wasn't a Cohen." "And why wasn't your father a Cohen?" "Because his father wasn't a Cohen." "And why was his father not a Cohen?" said the Chafetz Chaim. The yeshiva bocher now understood that the Chafetz Chaim wants to tell him something, so he shut up. Said the Chafetz Chaim, "I'll tell you why your father isn't a Cohen, and your great-grandfather isn't a Cohen, and your great-great-grandparents also aren't Kohanim. I'll tell you why. Many years ago, when the Jewish people came out of Egypt and they were in the desert, and they were at Mount Sinai, and Moshe went up the mountain to receive the Torah, and he was there for 40 days and 40 nights. And afterwards, when the Jewish people saw that he wasn't coming down as quickly as they thought he should have, they made an idol and started worshipping it. And when Moshe came down, he shouted, "Mila Hashem Elai! Who is for Hashem should come to me." And these were the people that were going to go and punish these Jews that were worshipping idols in the desert. And who came when he shouted that? My family. My great parents and my great grandparents and great parents, going back and back. They were the people that moved and went there. And your family didn't. said the Chofetz Chaim to this boy. Your family didn't, and because of that, I'm a Cohen, said the Chofetz Chaim, and you're not a Cohen. Said the Chofetz Chaim, next time that happens, make sure that you don't just sit back. Wow, what tremendous Musa, says the Chofetz Chaim here. This is a situation that's going to happen to everybody. Every one of us in our lifetime has situations like that. Every one of us has situations of Mila Hashem Elai. Who is going to stand up and be counted? Who is going to stand up for the right? In the times of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, it was these important community leaders that were at the meal that didn't object when they saw this injustice being done. That was their calling of Mila Hashem Elai, and they missed it. And because of that, it seems to be that was, in my opinion, the reason, the base reason why the temple was destroyed. Because all the people at that meal just sat back and watched this terrible injustice happen in front of their eyes and didn't seem to care. We see that Moshe Rabbeinu was appointed to be the leader of the Jewish people because of this character trait, because of this quality of standing up for what's right, of spotting injustice and not being prepared to let it carry on. And we see that Pincus also got kahuna because of that. And in fact, we see from the story of the Chofetz Chaim that all the Kohanim got their kahuna because of this. Let me now give you another scenario. Let's say you're crossing the road and there's a green light. A green light, time for you to cross. But you can see a car speeding towards you. He's not going to stop. You can see that. What do? Do you walk into the road and say, hey, what an injustice. I'm right. I have the right of way here. I'm going to cross the road. Or do you say, hang on, wait, let me let this guy pass and then I'll cross the road. This is a terrible injustice is being done to me right now that I have to wait and let this guy go first. But it's not the sort of thing I should make a fuss about. I should just take a step back and let him go. I should be wise and not right. That's definitely right. That's what you should do in such a situation. But doesn't that contradict what I've just been saying up until now? That the quality that Hashem is looking for in us, and because of that maybe even the temple was destroyed, is that we should care about justice. We should care about the right things being done. We should care when we see injustice. So what's the difference between the two? The difference is that the case of the green light, it's not important. It's not important. There's nothing, no big deal. So what? But in the case of Moshe and the Jew being beaten, that was a big deal. In the case of Pincus and the leader, the community leader doing immoral acts, it is important. The case of the Jews worshipping the idol in the desert, it is important. And for us even more so, the case of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa being thrown out of this party, embarrassed in front of everybody. That is a reason why you have to stand up for what's right. But crossing the road with a green light isn't. So how are we going to decide now? How are we going to know which cases are cases where we're supposed to act, we're supposed to be worried, and where cases where we're just supposed to shut up and not make a deal about it, like in the green light? Did anyone say being a Jew is easy? That's our challenge. That's our challenge, that we have to know when there's a situation when we need to stand up and be counted, and when we just need to be quiet. That's tremendous wisdom, tremendous chokhmah tremendous understanding of situations to know when, and we have to pray that Hashem will give us the siyata dishmaya, that we will make the right decisions and do the right things, that we won't miss the opportunities when we are expected to stand up, and that we won't stand up when we shouldn't really have stood up. In our generation, we're told that we're not a generation that knows how to reprove people. When you see someone doing something wrong, not keeping Shabbat, we don't say anything. We don't say anything in our generation. We don't know how to do it. That's not for us to do, but it's for us to care. But not for us to do. The way always to bring people closer to Hashem, to be mekarev people, is always through love. It's always through showing them how much you care for them, rather than reproving them for the things that they're doing. Reproving doesn't work. It's been proven over the years it doesn't work. I know a beautiful story of a family where the mother became a Baal Tshuva, and she had 3 boisterous boys, teenage boys at the time, that weren't interested at all in following in her footsteps. She made the whole house kosher. She started serving kosher food at home. But all these children, every Friday night, they're all sitting around watching television. The mother didn't do anything. She never said a word to these guys. She would just sit in the corner of the room quietly and read Tehillim to herself after the meal on Friday night. Never said a word to them. 30, 40 years later, all 3 of them became rabbis. Wondrous. All 3 of those boys became rabbis. That's the way to be machzir people b'tshuva. Just by showing them and giving them an example, just by being there for them, loving them, and showing them that you care for them. That's the way to be machzir people by tshuva, not by reproving them. So please don't misunderstand what I've been saying today, that now everyone's going to go out and start protesting about every injustice that we see going around. No. As I said, you have to be very, very careful and very, very clever. A few times in your lifetime it'll happen that you have an injustice where you're supposed to stand up and make a point of it. But that doesn't mean that it happens all the time. As I said before, who said it's easy being a Jew? It's not easy being a Jew. B'ezrat Hashem, we have to pray to Hashem that He'll give us siyata dishmaya. He'll give us help from heaven to understand and know when to stand up and when not to stand up. But to care, we must always care. It must always hurt us whenever we see injustice in the world. That's the lesson that I learned from Tisha B'Av and would take with me for the rest of the year. B'ezrat Hashem, Hashem Ya'azor li. May Hashem help me. And may we have the Mashiach very, very quickly. Thank you.